If people ask questions, I will discuss them first. If there's no questions in the chat and no comments, then I will just kind of uh, rebound back to my main topic, which for today is going to be energy and technology. So, energy independence, new technology, where we're using technology today, everything along those lines. Um, I personally have a strong view of energy independence as a country. I feel like I think that we should, as a country, have a very strong independence when it comes to energy creation and energy um, transmission. I Our current system for energy transmission is not the most ideal, in my opinion. There's uh, system is going to be taxed pretty soon here. This weekend, they're getting, I think, 15 inches of snow in Arkansas, and it's really going to put the pressure on their whole energy grid. I think. Hopefully, it will. Hopefully, it'll stay, and hopefully, they don't lose too much power. Hope their cities don't completely fall apart too much. But my brother's originally from here, so he'll be fine. Um, yeah. So energy infrastructure, energy grid, energy production. Those are very high on um, my importance. So I've always been very passionate about green energy because I thought it was just the coolest topic ever. You know, we grew up where we would burn things to create energy. You burn fuel in your car, you burn coal, you burn oil, natural gas to create energy. But now, all of a sudden these systems to create energy from things that just exist, these free resources. And I thought that was the coolest thing when I was younger, and that's initially why I got into wind energy as I did. It's a free resource that we can just take advantage of as we will. um, so let's go ahead and start kind of bounce back to some different what we currently have as our options, right? So we have, I think, what we use the most of right now, which is natural gas and coal and different fossil fuel uh, energy, and that, as we know, is the least clean. You know, when you burn fuel in your car, you have exhaust. When you burn fuel in a power plant, you have emissions. You're never going to have a clean burn. It's been talked about a lot and it's been wished a lot, but it's never turned out to be uh, financially feasible, as well as it's also just never been worth it for those energy companies to even really focus on reducing emissions. That's our main one right now, and then the two, I would say, biggest competitors right now that are kind of newly emerging: wind and solar. Um, there's there's a few companies that have completely switched to away from fossil fuels and towards wind and solar, and I think that they have a very large chance of becoming the next big energy sources. I obviously worked in wind for 5 years, so I've become very intimate with the systems there. Um, they're massive turbines. They're very large, very. Um, I always thought they were beautiful. I always thought they were very cool to look at. Whenever we travel to my grandma's place, occasionally we would drive past them, and I would see them. And I thought they were the coolest thing ever. Um, but the downside for wind, rather than being emissions, would be they are they take up space, right? You can't just have them in a city, so you have to have them on their own, on a wind farm or wherever. They're um, honestly, I'd say that's the biggest downside, is that you can't have it in a residential area. You need to keep it away from where people are living, because they do make a small amount of noise, and then the sun going past the blades can cause kind of a flickering or a flashing effect, depending on if it's reflecting or creating a shadow, and that can definitely impact uh, people's living if they're living near turbines. Um, and then solar, it's a it's probably one of my favorites. My parents have a few solar panels at their house. I know they've been kind of looking to increase their um, number of panels they have, because they're just they work very well, and what they currently have isn't quite enough to handle their entire energy needs. So they've been either looking into a smaller wind or another solar array. Haven't quite figured out what's best for their situation yet, but I do like solar a lot, because for one, you can put it anywhere, right? You can put solar in a city. You can put solar um, pretty much wherever the sun hits. You can have it. I do see a question. What would you say to those who want to keep turbines out of the UP? So there is a very strong, I guess, drive to keep these large wind turbines out of areas that people don't want to see them, right? They're very visible. So I think the biggest factor is people are afraid of losing their beautiful landscape. There there's a very large "not in my backyard" kind of movement. Um, However, I do understand that. Like, it's a completely valid concern, and I think my biggest argument is that if if we don't have some sort of we need some sort of energy production. Otherwise, our prices are going to stay high, and we're just going to continue on the path we're on. And right now, the our current path, excuse me, our current path has a lot of, I would say, turbulence ahead of us, because there's a potential for AI to really take off, which we all, I don't, okay, I won't assume that we all know it, but there is a lot of concern for the databases to take a lot of energy and a lot of water. There's another question. Actually, I'll finish up with what I'm saying right now. So basically, what I'm saying is our energy demand is only going to increase, and the costs are not going down. So we're going to either have to ship in our energy from outside, which is going to, again, cost more money if we produce it ourselves. So I would love to say that solar can solve all our problems, but it's the best scenario I see is a system that takes all of the options that we have and combines them together. That means solar in places that are, feasible for it, and wind in places that are, potentially more out of the way. Um, Maybe not as visible, but still just as windy. I do think it is important to keep natural landscapes intact and less touched by humans, because I do think that is one of the key aspects of Michigan, especially the UP. Um, okay, question: do you see a difference between inland turbine locations versus places such as the Keweenaw, major major after and my? Oh, I see. So yes, the argument of bird migration. So that is a topic that is taken very seriously in the wind community. While I was working in wind, we would often see people going around with clipboards. They are basically checking to see if there's any dead animals, birds, bats, etc., at the base of the turbine. If we ever did see a dead bird at the base of a turbine, we were supposed to call it in. I think I saw maybe two or three. I did see a nest of robins on the stairs, actually. Not sure why, but they're just pretty cute. I'm assuming they were fine. Um, However, big birds, major raptors, yes. If if we ever spotted bald eagles or other, like, especially endangered species or any large birds around the turbine, depending on the location and depending on the bird, they would occasionally shut um, the farm down. So I think it would definitely be a concern for up north because they do everything they can to limit the endangerment to the local wildlife, and so I do know that they do a lot of studies on migration patterns and things like that. But that's something that the like planning commission would have to take into account, whether or not there's a lot of, because the UP does have a lot of eagles, and so that is definitely something to take into mind when thinking of planning these projects. And I do believe that they do a very good job of focusing on that when they're making these projects. And once they're up, they also still are thinking about it. They're still doing tests and um, taking surveys and uh, shutting down turbines if there's birds in the area. So I'm a big fan of the community that is kind of gathered around turbines and how supportive they are of the local wildlife. Um, that kind of answer your question. Do you have any follow up questions? Um, yeah, I would love to say that we'll never have to have any turbines or big power plants or anything like that, but it's impossible to you know live our lives that we live without energy. So it's got to be produced somewhere. I that is one of the reasons I love solar so much is because it's very out of the way, especially if it's just on your roof of their house. I do see another question. Do you think dispersed production of wind and solar generated power would be a good idea? Small wind turbines next to people's farms instead of a big centralized wind farm. Um, yes and no. So there's a, I guess it would be I guess there's no reason not to do like neither of those are bad ideas. I'd say some have uh, other benefits than others. So the benefits of a large wind farm, right, is that you have all of your you can well one you can have larger turbines, um, and then a much more streamlined and centralized like system to get it on the grid. Because if you have a large turbine, and I'm talking like 3 megawatts, right? One house isn't going to use that much. So if you have one of those large turbines, for a small area, it's you're going to have a lot of equipment to kind of one connect that to the grid, and then two, transport it to the surrounding area. You could do it like that, and it's not really a bad idea, but it's more efficient, I think, and streamlined to just kind of have them all in one area and to easily excuse me, to easily kind of um, transport the energy, I guess. Because you'd usually big wind farms just have one large substation where they can connect it to the grid and then uh, transport it from there. Um, this smaller turbines are generally less efficient for their for the cost you put into them. So the larger you make something, the more it's going to produce for the amount of money you pay to put it up. So it isn't a bad idea, but it's just more efficient. Almost every energy system that we have is more efficient when you do more of it at once. You know, it's why cars are so much less efficient than a power plant, for instance. What does energy independence look like to you? Well, I would say for me, energy independence it looks a lot like we're not having to worry about resources when it comes to energy. So a lot less reliance on oil and natural gas. We get a lot of oil, shipped in. Right now, there's a whole debate over Venezuela and their oil and what our situation or like what our um, situation is regarding that, right? It's very oil has a tendency to inspire conflict, I think, within this country, and I don't think that's healthy for anyone. And it's definitely not something that I stand behind. I'm very peace driven, and I would love to see a country that can create um, their own methods for sustaining themselves. You know, so I think specifically we would have a system that is a little bit of everything, right? Because solar and wind are great. They're renewable. They never run out. However, they're intermittent, so they work best if they have things that are helping them. So if our system was major uh, majority of wind and solar and other renewables, and then kind of helped along by um, other sources that are a little bit more reliable, such as hydro, nuclear, and natural gas, right? Because you don't have to remove anything to create a system that works. In fact, it's best to have a system that has multiple multiple points. Therefore, you have less chance of failure. Um, so yeah. Uh, let's move on. Oh, another thing that we can get into is cost, right? Because solar and wind have officially surpassed other energy creation methods in cost, specifically for new projects, right? So looked, I'm getting this information from lazard.com. They do a lot of the um, levelized cost of energy, right? So the most expensive energy source from the ones that I've listed would be nuclear, which is 90 to $140 per megawatt hour. Yeah, per megawatt hour. And then next is hydroelectric at 60 to 100 per megawatt hour. And then next highest is natural gas, 45 to 75 per megawatt hour. And then we have wind, onshore wind specifically, which is 30 to 55, and solar, which is 25 to 45. So a lot of these renewable energy, or I guess specifically solar and wind, have kind of taken the lead in cost, cost in new projects. And these are they're also the least obtrusive, right? Is a natural gas plant, a nuclear plant, hydroelectric. Well, hydroelectric, first of all, is very limited to where the geography allows you to be. But um, natural gas and nuclear, you have to think about the other costs, waste and uh, emissions and how you're affecting the planet as well. I think nuclear is pretty clean overall. I want to look into nuclear a little bit more, but I am excited for where wind and solar are going to take us. I think it's going to be really cool. And alongside of those, however, this is a good time to bring it up. Energy storage is another key aspect of our um, energy independence, right? So, pretty recently, there was a company called Donut Labs that have released their kind of new technology. It's a solid state battery, which has kind of been the holy grail that have we've been chasing for the past, I don't even know how long, probably 20 years. Um, it's it's kind of been the the thing that we've all been chasing, right? We haven't got it yet. I just saw it released maybe like a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very excited about it. It has not been proven yet, I'd say. They released it, and I think there's a lot of there's a lot of companies doing, testing on it, but I do feel like this is um, has a lot of potential, right? Because energy storage is kind of the next a big part of making renewable energy work, especially for solar, since you're only generating energy during the day. You're not generating any at night. So having a reliable and efficient energy storage system is going to be very important for that to work on a large scale. Um, are there any more questions right now before I move on to other things? Okay, so I I do want to focus a lot on kind of our future and where I see that taking us. What I would love to see out of the US is for us to take energy creation a little bit more seriously. I think that right now we're not putting much energy or focus or research into developing this type of technology, right? We're kind of stuck in our ways a little bit with, you know, coal and oil and fossil natural gas kind of coasting on what technology we currently have. And I think that's kind of putting us in a spot where we aren't able to really lead the world in new developments, new technology. And I think that's really sad because there definitely was a time where we were more ambitious in what we could do as a country. And I really want to see that again. I wanna see a time where we can put the brilliant minds that we have in this country and the resources we have in this country towards really advancing these things. So I think that really is what I'm looking forward to a lot. Because there's other energy resources that we've you know briefly touched, but we don't really we aren't really investigating them as options as much as we could be. So geothermal, hydrogen, um, is an efficiency in grid modernization, right? Our grid hasn't changed for I don't even know how long. If someone could look that up, I would love to know because our grid has not changed in a very long time. And like I said, my brother's down in Arkansas right now, and I know Texas last year had a huge issue with their grid because what I think it had some like natural gas pipelines freeze up or something like that. I'd have to look more into that, but like we're running on old technology when I feel like we could be expanding the idea of what's possible. So I really want to see more investment in uh, renewable energy and other energy generation. I've seen ideas of wave energy, generating energy from waves in the ocean. Seen ideas of giant kite giant kites using the wind to generate energy. Like I would love to see more investment into ideas like that and a little bit less on ideas that are a little bit overused, I'd say. Let's see here. And I think excuse me. I think the reason I am so invested in energy independence, why it's so important to me is I think that our current reliance on foreign supplies is unhealthy for our current state of the country. Ooh, I see a comment. According to this article, most grids were built in the 1960s and 70s. Average life cycle of 50 to 80 years. Right. So that's significantly older than me. 60, so 50 to 60 years old. Yeah. And I feel like we haven't really made any advancements in that area either. So we're working with old systems that maybe aren't as efficient as they could be because we're not putting the time and energy into trying to make something better. I'm excited for there's a lot of new technology coming out, but I think we could do even more if we really put our focus on it. I was talking about independence, right? Um, yeah, foreign supply. I would love to not have to rely on it. It's great to trade with other countries, but I don't want that to be a requirement. Right? I don't want it to be necessary for us to rely on um, other countries for our own independence. We're such a large, wealthy, powerful, and smart country, so we should be able to power ourselves. You know. Um. Okay. So let's see here. Are there any other questions for the time being? Anything involving energy or new technology coming out? Probably not going to get too deep into AI tonight, just because um, I feel like it's big enough to be its own topic, so we can talk about that more another day, unless people really want to get into it now. But I think it's best we just kind of shelve that for later. Another kind of aspect to the energy and technology is electric vehicles. I've been very pro electric vehicle my whole life, even though they just kind of started cropping up pretty recently. I do think they have a lot of potential, especially with the new battery technology that's been coming out. Um, I'm very excited to see if that company Donut Labs, if their batteries really do um, prove to be what they're promising, then it could really shift things for the electric vehicle market, which I'm excited for. Uh, doesn't look like there's a whole lot more questions, so I think we will probably wrap it up there. Um, yeah, so I really want to just leave you on the note of the importance of energy independence and our focus on reinvesting our minds, our brilliance, and our talent into really advancing our technology and being able to kind of join the rest of the world in creating something new and really leading our world into something interesting. Uh, I am thankful for you all joining, and yes, yes, yep. Okay. So, okay, before I wrap up real quick, um, I do want to leave you with a question just to kind of think about. Um, what are concerns that you might have that don't get talked about enough? Um, want you to kind of think on that and maybe bring it up next time. I will be having another stream in 2 weeks. I'm gonna be doing an every other week stream. So 2 Wednesdays from now, I'll be doing another. So just try and think on what other concerns you might have about the energy market as it is. What concerns you. I know cost is a big thing for a lot of people in the UP because it's one of the higher cost locations to live right now. And yeah, so thanks everyone for joining, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks.